Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Anonymous Hedgehog podcast. My name is Maya.
And my name is Rich.
And we will be your host. So today's topic is about goal setting. So, I want to ask you, how, I know there's a lot of different practices of how people do goal setting. How do you do it in your daily life?
Honestly, I'm not actually the type of person that writes out a to-do list every day. I think I have just a long-term set of things I want to accomplish by the end of the year. But I don't have an actual short-term to-do list that I cross things off of. I usually keep that more in the back of my mind.
I feel like I used to be that kind of person. I would just keep it in the back of my mind. But I find that when I kind of just assume that I remember it, I always forget it. I don't know if that means my goals weren't that important in the first place, but it's I feel like sometimes I get really inspired, right? There's always that time 2:00 in the morning, and then you just get really inspired to do something.
Yeah.
And then after that kind of moment of inspiration disappears, I realize I always forget about that goal. So what I do now is that I actually keep so I have a journal, and I keep kind of short-term goals, which short-term goals are probably this week, this month, or whatever. And then I have long-term goals, which is probably within 5 to 10 years. And then I have really long-term goals, which is kind of entire life goals.
And you write them all down?
Yeah, I write them all down when I think of it, because I feel that sometimes I get so bogged down by short-term kind of situations or whatever that are happening in my life that I really forget about the big picture, my my really big long-term goals. And so it kind of helps me to kind of just look back at it and kind of put everything in perspective, this is what I want to accomplish within the next 30 years, 40 years. And so this kind of the struggles that I'm going through right now really has nothing to do with my long-term goal.
That's a really healthy mindset. I think we all do get so caught up in what's going on right now that we just totally forget about what we're actually trying to accomplish. That B or C you got in class isn't going to change anything 10 years from now. So there's no point of stressing about it right now. But at the same time, the downside is that if you set goals for yourself to accomplish in 30 years, that's very constraining, right? If I say I want to be in this profession earning this salary in 30 years, then if I get an opportunity that allows me to start a company or something, I might not take it because I'm so constrained by this other goal.
That's true. I would say that that's true, but that's also kind of the point of why I do it, because I want it to be constraining, because I know the kind of person I am, and I'm just the kind of person that I'm interested in literally everything. I feel like I could go into kind of any career path and I could be pretty happy with it. But my point is that the reason I set those really long-term goals is that I feel in the short term, my interest will get so swayed by little things that happen in my life. For example, this is completely random, but the other day, my friend was talking about oh, I want to redo my Instagram feed to make it look nicer. And I'm oh, I kind of want to do that too. And then you look up stuff about personal branding, and then you and then you kind of get into this whole world of social media and oh, I want to grow my follower count. And then I step back and I'm wow, that's completely useless, right? I just got completely diverted, and I just spent my time doing something that was very useless in the long term. And so I feel the point of my setting those long-term goals is not that they can't change, that they're they're static or something, but it's kind of just to kind of set a constraint for myself to remind myself of my long-term goals and not be sidetracked by something that's happening.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. But for me, I think with me, I guess I'm just not that interested in a bunch of things. For me,
Really?
With social media exposure, I've definitely had the thought of, what if I was a big influencer? That would be so cool. What if I grew my Instagram page? But it's never been something that I've actually considered as a practical thing to do. So it just never crossed my mind to actually, you went so far as to look up how to make a personal brand, but I've never gone so far as to do that. So I think because I have less interest, my interests typically lie within coding and STEM. So I feel like naturally I'm already focused in one career area, which is why it's more important for me to try to broaden my goals rather than narrow them down.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I think it's like the different kind of people that like we tend to be because I'm like I get super like I'm kind of impulsive like this. Well, I will get super like deep into like a topic if that makes sense. Like I'll develop a new interest and then I will just like I'll just like start it like right away. Like I won't even, and like I'll like dedicate a lot of time to it. This is like a random example. But for example, like the other day I was kind of like going through all my clothes and stuff. And I was like, oh, like what clothes should I buy? Like what clothes do I need for like this next season or whatever? And then I created like a whole Excel spreadsheet to kind of organize my outfits. And like that was just like, and
Yeah.
I look back like, wow, that was such a waste of time. But like, it's like I get very dedicated to like random tasks, if that makes sense. So I feel like I get very dedicated to tasks that I almost like, it's not like I have an interest in fashion or whatever, but it's just
Right.
like, I don't know, like I just get very dedicated to those like little things. And so I think
Yeah.
like having those big goals just reminds me to like not, like not spend time on that stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable personality trait to be able to like immerse yourself in every little thing, even if it's not a field that you're interested in. I guess I just don't relate too much to that, but I wonder why. Like, why am I less interested in things like, you know, designing like a new closet for myself and like getting the latest fashion brands, whereas you are, even though both of our fields are totally different.
Yeah, I have no idea because like we are both like very interested in STEM, right? But like I guess the range of our other interests are so like vastly different.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we're also just similar people in general too. And so, I mean, there's times when like I used to do like art and I would like draw sketches with my
Yeah.
pencil, but I think that also had to do with like the fact that I was younger and there's literally nothing I could do.
Uh-huh.
But like once that like but those are like little peaks of interest that end up sort of just expiring and leaving. So that was like a phase that I had and then it ended abruptly. But like long term I've always been more interested in like STEM and that hasn't changed.
Okay, so I'll ask you this. Like, have you always wanted to be a coder, like ever since, or like a programmer, like when you were like young? Is that what you always wanted to do?
Well, even now I don't want to do that.
Oh, okay. Well, like you want to do something in like tech or something?
Yeah, honestly, like when people ask me like what do you want to do when you're older, like I genuinely don't have an answer. Like I have
Really?
interests right now, but if you were to say like, oh, do you want to work like a 9 to 5 job in like a big tech company? Like, yeah, there's money there, but like I don't think I would want to do that. And then at the same time, like, do you want to create a startup? Like, I mean, it depends on what the startup is. Like, it depends on if I'm passionate about it. There's just so
Yeah.
many things that are variable for me that I can't set my long-term goals because, especially in the tech industry, when everything is changing, like
Yeah.
day by day, it's so hard to set a long-term goal as to what you want to do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, see, like to be honest, like I concede that like my long-term goals, like it could change, and like I'm not like 100% sure. Like, if I think back to when I was maybe in middle school or even elementary school, like I used to want to be like a musician, and like that, and I at the time I was super invested in it, and I bought all this like recording equipment, and I used to like I spent all these days kind of practicing music, and then like kind of later I wanted to be like a music producer, and then I would do all this stuff, and like I think my long-term goals have changed a lot, but I feel like my mindset is just like having kind of that set goal is better than having kind of nothing at all, if that makes sense. Like it's like it makes me feel like I don't know if you feel this way, but like when I don't have kind of like a goal that I'm working towards, I always feel very lost. Like I'm not exactly, it's kind of like I'm like wading around in water and I have like no idea like which direction I'm going. Like if I have kind of a clear path, even if it's not the path that I end up on in the end, I feel like if I continue down that path, like you can't go wrong, if that makes sense. Like you might end up with like extra knowledge and extra kind of like expertise in a field that you don't end up in, but I feel like that can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you feel about like multi-talented people? Like, the people who
Hmm.
sing and then they also dance and then they
Hmm.
also do art and then they also like code on the side. Like people that span multiple industries, whether it's to make a profit or it's just as a hobby. Like, do you think that's effective? Or do you think people should be very single layered?
I have been so torn up on this kind of idea, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm someone like I was like I'm super into music, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm also like very into sports, right? And I'm like
Mm-hmm.
I like play sports in college, and then but I'm also very interested in STEM, and I'm also into politics, and I have like all these different interests,
Yeah,
and it kind of
yeah.
spans like super. It's just like very random, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I used to really reject the idea of kind of like that Renaissance man kind of idea, which is just like you kind of do everything. Cause I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you just don't have so much time in your life to do everything, right? Like there's,
Mm-hmm.
you either be good at one thing or just mediocre at everything. Like that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
what I used to like think. But I feel like now we're kind of, I was just talking to my friend the other day about this. I feel like we're kind of entering almost like a new Renaissance kind of like a new kind of where like the Renaissance person is the ideal. And I think a lot of it has to do with
Oh,
social
really?
media
Mm-hmm.
because like social media makes like changing fields or like spanning different fields so accessible. Like I don't know like what kind of like YouTube or entertainment you necessarily watch, but I watch a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kind of it's like I watch. Oh, I know that we both watch like a physics YouTuber, and
Mm-hmm.
then I also watch some like lawyer YouTubers, and it's like weird because like they make money from their YouTube profession, and like they're kind of an
Mm-hmm.
influencer, but they're also a
Yeah.
lawyer on the side, and like
Yeah.
that's so crazy because those are completely different fields. Like think about like they're like one part like they're kind of like an Instagram model, but then they're also like an attorney, and I'm just like that's really
Yeah.
weird to me. But
Yeah.
I feel like almost I don't think necessarily that you should pursue every interest that comes to you, but I feel like you shouldn't constrain yourself either.
Yeah. And you actually bring up a really good point about combining fields. Like I've just found, I actually discovered this like this year, that the interdisciplinary fields that exist are some of the most profitable fields ever. Like
Yeah, yeah.
when you combine computation with neuroscience, like that
Uh-huh.
is such a niche field with so much research potential that it becomes huge. So I think like whenever you combine two or more fields and you use aspects from each field, it's
Yeah.
very productive. But I guess my question lies more in like not combining the fields. Like with the YouTuber, he's
Yeah.
combining his YouTube channel is about being a lawyer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's sort of interdisciplinary. But I'm talking about like an unrelated hobby. Like let's say he's a lawyer, but his YouTube channel is about like comedy skits. Like would that be effective?
Um I feel like I mean, I guess it depends on what it is because I was thinking about this the other day where like so I have been like a lifelong golfer and I was kind of thinking about like whether or not I want to continue investing time in golf when I like graduate college and when I kind of go in my future career path. And I was like but then I kind of like remembered that like in the professional world in academia golf is a really big sport. And so I was just like, I think I am going to invest time in golf because I think that it will benefit my career path. Because like a lot of clients and whatever business, like it's like the stereotype, like they all negotiate business over golf and like whatever. So I think it depends what that other thing is. Like I feel like comedy and like it can't possibly like it doesn't really benefit you in being a lawyer like at all. But something like if you play, yeah, for example, I was saying like golf, like a sport that's kind of like sort of related or can help you kind of negotiate or like develop kind of business connections, I think that would be useful. But yeah, something that's kind of just purely like a hobby, purely entertainment, I feel like that's not as useful.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, once two things are related, even in the slightest bit way, they can both be productive. And
Yeah.
also, it's like almost every field has so many subfields now just because of like the fact that like technology exists. Like, like before it used to be like, oh, I'm coding, so then that means I'm probably making a website. But now it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
coding, I could be making an app, I could be making a website, I could be doing back end, I could be doing front end, blah blah blah. There's
yeah,
like a million fields within coding. Same thing goes with like art. Like, oh, I'm doing art. It used to mean like, oh, I'm probably just painting. But like now it's like I'm painting, or I'm doing like special watercolors, or I'm doing graphic design, or I'm doing some sort of
exactly.
marketing with art. And so there's so many different options now that the individual fields themselves have interdisciplinary fields within them.
Yeah, I agree. Like the example you're talking about art, it's just like, yeah, before it's just like you either do painting or I don't know, like sketches or whatever. But now like you can do graphic design. And then once you are in graphic design, you kind of have to learn how to market your designs, right? And that is like kind of personal branding and that's more marketing, advertising kind of thing. And I feel like a lot of it, like again, it has to do with social media and the idea of like technology and kind of advertising yourself. It's because like social media is such I was actually thinking about this the other day too. It's like because social media is such a big part of like advertising, I feel like just kind of knowing how to do those skills on social media can be very like productive no matter what field you go into.
That's very true. It's very true. And it's interesting you bring up like personal branding in terms of artists, because I've
Yeah.
always wondered like, why does the artist matter? Because isn't the art what the artist is selling? So shouldn't all of the attention to marketing be towards the art piece, not the actual artist?
I guess it's like the idea that like some people prefer a certain style of art. So like if the artist creates one good piece, then like all of their pieces will be good. I have no idea. I don't really know that much about art, honestly. But I think I agree. Like, yeah, it's more of you see this with like I mean like modern art. Like like
Yeah.
if an artist like it's kind of just like if an artist already has a name for themselves, like they could do anything, and that art could be worth like $1 million.
Yeah, I've always wondered how that worked because, like, my 3-year-old cousin draws better pictures than some of that modern art, but my 3-year-old cousin's art is not worth $1 million. And so it's
Yeah.
like, how do those artists build such a brand for themselves to the point where they can put anything on a canvas and it'll sell for millions?
I think it's definitely like kind of a flaw in our like society or whatever, or the way we view things. But I also think that like it's kind of just like people learn how to play the system kind of idea, or it's just like it's kind of just the way the system works. I feel like I can't imagine a world where like that wouldn't be the case. That like just because like this you see this in like all different types of fields too, like movies for like directors. Like if you have like a big name director, like that movie is gonna make millions no matter like how good the movie actually is.
Yeah, this goes along to what we were talking about at the end of our last episode of like fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
where like once you have a reputation, you've made it. And so in order to get that reputation, all you need to do is just basically pretend that you already have it.
Yeah. That's kind of crazy. Like yeah, I remember when I was like really young, my parents would tell me like I mean this is probably like not a good thing to tell your like really young kid, but like they're saying like in like business like you kind of have to like bluff until um you just kind of have to bluff about your accomplishments a lot. And I was just like, that's so, because I remember, and I was watching this sitcom too, where like this guy he was getting hired, or like he was making a resume, and then he lied on his like first resume,
Yeah.
and like, and that's all he needed to get a job, right? And then like
Yeah.
subsequently, like the rest of the resumes, he didn't need to lie anymore because he already got that first job. But it's kind of like that whole idea. It's just like you need to have experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. So like, how do you get either of those things?
Yeah, that whole cycle, it's like a common meme. And I've seen multiple news stories where it's like the dean of a huge university is caught lying on like
Yeah,
her first resume from like
yeah,
way back. And
yeah,
that one resume just helped you get promoted up in the ranks. And it's the same thing with like when you graduate college, like the only people that care about your grades in college are your first employers. And then after that, people only
Yeah.
care about who your first employer was. So once you get past that first stage, then you're set. You've made it.
I feel like that's such a flaw in our system, like the way that, or at least how the employment system works. It's just like, because we've both like seen it or like heard about it. And I feel like lying on your first resume or like kind of that initial bluff is so common that like, I feel like things, I don't know, like I feel like employment shouldn't necessarily be based on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's an interesting question because, like, should should an employer see your college grades from 10 years ago, or should they just see like your previous work experience? Because like the grades aren't as relevant anymore.
Hmm. I guess it's like when you put it that way, it kind of makes sense. It's just like the most recent kind of accomplishments. But at the same time, it's like when you're getting your first, like my parents would always tell me that getting your first job is the hardest because you have no other experience.
Hmm.
So that I feel like that incentivizes people to lie, like when getting their first job. And kind of it's like afterwards, it kind of like you get promoted and whatever, and like you kind of forget about it. But like you were talking about, like that dean that like I don't know, like let's say like 20 years later, like it catches up to you. And I feel like that is that's like a very scary thought.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that like even though it caught up to her 20 years later, like I'm sure she was extremely qualified at the moment because she had been a
Exactly.
dean for 20 years. Like they're not going to find someone who's better than her now just because she lied 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like she was probably yeah qualified for the position that she got. And I feel like this is a like this happens with a lot of people in their first job. It's like it's not that they're not qualified. Like just because you don't necessarily have experience or you don't have that kind of job experience, it doesn't mean that you're not qualified
Hmm.
for the job. So I feel like the way that I don't know, the way that we evaluate like hiring people is just very it's just so subjective kind of. Like I feel like I feel like this with a lot of kind of I like employment based things. I remember my psychology teacher in high school talk about this. It was kind of like a lot of like hiring is so subjective. It has to do with like how you connect with a manager or like how it's kind of like personal. Like if you're like charming, you know, if you're like attractive, and you kind of like you know how to make like correct small talk. And she was just saying that how like she graduated from UC Santa Barbara and she
Hmm.
like noticed like the Santa Barbara like flag or whatever and she would just make small talk about UC Santa Barbara and then like employers like that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's almost like the world of business and I feel like the world of business and like the world of getting a job and things like that it's so subjective.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up small talk because that like prompts a whole nother debate about whether soft skills are more important than actual technical skills.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think they are. Like being able
Yeah.
to communicate and being able to give speeches and presentations far outweighs any technical like coding language or a math concept that you can just memorize and understand.
Yeah, this is why they always say that like A students will work for C students.
Hmm.
Like it's kind of like if you look at all of the kind of like CEOs or like a lot of them are people that dropped out of college. And if you look at like I was telling you this the other day, it's like a lot of presidents like their SAT scores works like pretty low compared to the average person. And it's so crazy how they end up kind of being the leaders of society. It's almost because like it's because of the soft skills like you were talking about. Like they were able to talk their way through it. Like the best business people are the people that can talk the most, they can sell you on things
Hmm.
even if they don't have the technical skills.
Hmm. Yeah, and I see this all the time when I go to like hackathons, which are like
Hmm.
coding competitions where
Yeah.
people will make an app in 24 hours and then present the app and the best app wins. And like 9 out of 10 times the app that wins is not the best app objectively.
Uh-huh.
Objectively, the app is less
Yeah.
complex than the best app, but it wins because the presenters presented it best. They spent a lot of time on making the PowerPoint. Sometimes the app that wins isn't even an app, it's just a concept of an app, and it still
Really.
wins just because it was presented so nicely. I think that's really does support what you said about like presidents just having talked their way through.
Yeah.
Everything now these days is built off of connections. People meeting at parties, people meeting at bars, and then that turning into actual business relationships.
I feel like this brings up an interesting thing, like in kind of in high school and in college. I feel like soft skills should be more emphasized. Like I feel like almost like I know like in high school you learn like presentation skills and whatever, but you never really learn like how to talk to people. Like we were saying like this YouTube channel like Charisma on Command that we both watch. Like that for me was so educational because you never learn how to like communicate and how to talk to people properly. It's kind of like what we were saying yesterday, like it's something that we all do, but no one really knows, like, no one really knows how
Oh,
other people
yeah.
do it kind of properly, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like something we all take for granted. Like, yeah, we can all talk, whatever. But like, do any of us really know how to do it properly and to make it like kind of effective, make people like us when we do talk to them?
Yeah. Even classes that are labeled communications, they don't
Yeah.
actually tell you how to make small talk, how to
Yeah.
create relationships. They don't teach you that. It's all just up for like discussion. And
Yeah.
honestly, though, like, I think there's a reason. Like, the reason they don't teach us these soft skills is because if everyone had soft skills, then how would we pick who the best people are? Like, you need to have only a small subset of people knowing how to communicate in order to have the president and the vice president and like all of the leaders of the country. And then the rest of the people who don't have soft skills need to be working for the people that do. Because if everyone had soft skills, there's not enough room for everyone to be a leader.
That's so crazy because that assumes that like the point of education is not really to benefit everyone. It's kind of to weed out like the leaders from the followers. Like that's so crazy that you say that because we think of education as kind of giving everyone an even playing field or whatever. But the truth is that like if like under the soft skills thing that you were just saying, it like what education really does is it like separates out the people that are like really special.
Yeah, it teaches you how to work for someone else. It teaches you how to complete assignments by a deadline. It teaches you
Yeah.
how to work on a timeline. Those are all skills employees have, like good employees.
Yeah.
But leaders don't work on a timeline. They set their own timelines. And so I don't think the education system is meant for that particular group. Obviously, it's like a one size fits all thing. Most people
Yeah.
are not going to become CEOs and leaders. So the education system needs to cater to that majority.
Do you feel like I feel like the kind of leadership thing has been more emphasized in our education now, but I've always kind of felt like I guess not everyone can be a leader, like I've always felt that. And I remember thinking like my parents when I was younger, they used to really want me to, have like a big startup and kind of be an entrepreneur and start my own business. And I was just kind of thinking like I guess it's not like I don't want to start my own business, but it's that like I don't really care for it that much. Like I would honestly rather work kind of a 9 to 5. I would rather work for somebody else because I enjoy doing that. And I feel like a lot of I feel like the way kind of our society is built, it sort of assumes that everyone can be a leader. Like it sort of kind of incentivizes everyone to view themselves as like, oh, you can be like the next big thing and like whatever. And I don't think it's not like hard. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's kind of like it sets a lot of people up for that kind of like failure because you realize that like, like only one person or like can be the CEO, right? Like the rest of the people are going to work for the company. And if you kind of have the expectation or like, oh, like ever since I was young, social media was telling me that I can become the CEO, and you kind of like, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for that disappointment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think schools definitely need to zoom out more and show like it's so easy to get caught up in your own world and realize like, oh, like I am the chosen one, like you were saying
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
like I am the CEO. But like I think if we just focused on zooming out in the education system and showing kids that they are not the only kid that exists, and
Yeah.
it's disappointing at first, but like letting children recognize that there are other children who have equal or greater ambitions than them
Yeah.
can just set them up for like a practical future.
And I feel like it almost incentivizes them to work harder too. Like when you realize that there are other people competing for your positions, like that incentivizes at least me to like want to work harder, to want to like beat the other people, right? Like if you are stuck in the mindset that you are the chosen one, like you don't have to work to be that chosen one. But if there
Yeah.
are like a billion other chosen ones, like you have to work to be the one that stands out.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, like we both come from very competitive area, and
Uh-huh.
I feel like there's a lot of viewpoints on competitiveness, and the
Yeah.
majority of the viewpoints are that it's bad. But I
Yeah.
honestly, and I think you agree with me because we've talked about this before, but like I honestly think that having this competitive environment has allowed me to be the very best version of myself, because otherwise I would have been under the mindset of, oh, I'm the smartest one in the room anyway, why do I need to try? But being aware that I am not the smartest one in the room, and like understanding that everyone in the room thinks that they are the smartest one in the room, just humbles you to the point where it motivates you to do better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So we can just end the episode with that thought. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.